implications and prospects. I'm Szabolcsányi, Deputy Director of the Institute and today's events moderator. I also very warmly welcome our speakers. Going in order, we have here Mr. David Engels, Senior Analyst at the Instytut Zachodni from Poznan. We have here Mr. Tamás Csiki, Research Fellow of the Institute for Strategic and Defense Studies in Budapest. We have here also Mr. Péter Wagner, Senior Analyst at the Institute of Foreign Affairs and Trade, also from Budapest. And we have here Professor Kis-Benedek from the University of National Public Service, Budapest. So, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and the possibility that we can spend an hour of smart discussion here. Our topic is related to migration, the migration situation in Europe, and if you had the opportunity, the audience, to check our program, then you'll see that we will examine this complex issue from a number of different aspects. Some are security related, some are more general, but one thing is common in all of them. I think they will be very, very exciting. So just some technical information. I ask all of you to keep yourself muted throughout the event and have your cameras turned off. But we would also welcome some activity from you. If you have any questions about any of the lectures from our presenters, then please use the chat function and ask me, or even you can use send everyone function. So perhaps the addressee of the question will also see it. And once we are done with the presentations, we are happy to ask those questions. And you can of course ask all of our guests today. So I warmly encourage you to do so. And technical information, we are recording this event, which we can use subsequently for any purposes. And by attending, you consent there too. And now I wouldn't rob your time with other thoughts, and I would like to give the virtual floor to Mr. David Engels to have his presentation, hold his presentation. Sir?
Yes, so I hope you can hear me fine now. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, first, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be able to participate in this debate on a very crucial topic, I think, for the future, not only of Europe or the European Union or our nation states, but for the future of Western civilization in general. The first opening of the European borders in 2015, which led to the chaotic immigration of more than 2 million people from mainly Islamic countries, was a political catalyst that triggered several severe consequences, not only for Western, but also for Eastern Central Europe. The first was a general change in the perception of refugees. Before 2015, there was a quite large acceptance of the need to allow war refugees to find asylum in Europe for the duration of the crisis affecting their homelands. But since then, the obvious fact that many of the so-called refugees came from countries without any connection to the current war zones of the Near East and were only motivated by economic interests launched a violent discussion on whether Europe really needs to take in indiscriminately everyone coming from countries with a lower economic status, or whether there are natural limits to our moral duty of hospitality. This discussion triggered a wider debate around the definition of what European meant. Whereas the founding fathers, the European institutions insisted on the Greco-Roman and Jewish Christian heritage of Europe in order to provide a framework for identity, integration, and assimilation, the recent doctrine of political correctness is imposing in an increasingly radical way the idea that the future of Europe and its identity should only be based on universalist and multiculturalist factors. And the refugee crisis has shown how even previously Christian democratic parties have adopted this radical point of view. That these high-flying ideals also possessed a much more down-to-earth aspect became clear at least from the moment onward when leading economists claimed Europe needed to import new citizens in order to fill vacant positions, and when leftist liberal politicians strongly opted in favor of quickly providing the newcomers with national citizenship. The first have indeed a strong interest in lowering the wages for the autochthonous Europeans by creating a situation of competition, the latter in increasing the numbers of their voters in order to face growing popular resentment against this multicultural politics. This tendency was mainly supported by the then and now German government of Angela Merkel, who not only willfully ignored the Dublin agreements, but also tried to bully all other countries, above all in Eastern Central Europe, into opening their borders. This resulted not only in widespread resentment towards what is increasingly being perceived as the German hegemony over the European Union and a certain form of moralizing arrogance, where European Union rules apply for everyone except Germany. It also led to the rise of Germany's biggest opposition party, the AfD, whose program was hitherto centered on the Euro crisis, but now also includes massive criticism of mass immigration. This party, as well as the numerous other so-called populist parties emerging everywhere in Europe, were massively ostracized by the media as the insoluble link between uncontrolled mass immigration, Islamism, and terrorism became obvious to everyone except those firmly clinging to the narrative of the mainstream media. Indeed, since 2015, many of the terrorist acts have been committed by people previously heartily welcomed by their new European hosts, and it became quickly apparent that the main feeling of the new citizens was not one of gratitude, but rather of resentment and the wish to reshape their new host countries in a mostly Islamic fashion. The realization of this tendency led to a growing social and cultural divide everywhere in Europe. On the one hand, those who continue to believe in multiculturalism, open borders, and universalist ideals. On the other hand, those who have a more culturalist analysis of the situation and are broadly criticized as racist, Islamophobic, or even white supremacists by the respective governments and the media. This leads us to the central role of the media in the current situation. Indeed, there is an increasingly unholy alliance between the mass media, liberal leftist ideology, and most of the governments in power in Western Europe. An alliance strengthened through a vicious circle where the diminishing financial viability of the mass media has been partly guaranteed by indirect state subsidies, leading to a most undemocratic implicit understanding between both powers. If we add to this the influence of the big tech players such as Google or the social media, strongly committed to a leftist cultural agenda, the West has become dominated by an impressive ideological consensus so powerful that all resistance can quickly lead to social, professional, often even material ostracism, so that conservatives are increasingly obliged to form parallel societies of their own if they want to assure the continuity and even the survival of Western civilization, as I have tried to show in my recent book, Was tun? Only Eastern Central Europe seems for the moment to resist these tendencies. Thus, the Visegrad states refused to take their imposed quota of alleged refugees, as they understood that even as most of these refugees would have traveled to Germany in order to benefit from their much higher social allowances, such an would have been a one-way path. Indeed, many of the newcomers do not seek to integrate themselves as did their 1950s or 1960s forerunners, but are already well adapted to the modern world and know how to use it for their own objectives. Accepting the formation of even small pockets of settlers and the formation of parallel societies leads sooner or later to their uncontrolled growth, facilitated by the mobility ensured by the Schengen system. Thus, the only answer to the threat not only of Islamization, but also, and perhaps most importantly, the dilution of cultural identity, and thus the slow dismantling of civic cohesion and social solidarity, can only be a flat refusal. And history will show how Western Europe in the next decades will increasingly become prey to ethnic, social, and cultural disorder, even violence, while the East probably remain much more stable and may conserve one day, who knows, the last remnants of true Europe. Of course, this refusal brought the Visegrad states not only a lot of sympathies from the Western European conservatives, it also put them right in the middle of the line of fire from Western leftist liberal media and governments. And even today, 5 years later, the whole East-West discourse is dominated by Eastern Central Europeans' refusal of mass immigration. The consequences are increasingly dangerous, not only for Europe's East, but for the survival of the whole European project. Indeed, the West is massively trying to weaken the Hungarian and the Polish government by financial blackmail, the support of opposition media, and unconditional help for so-called NGOs advertising politically correct positions. And it is an open question for how long the East will be able to resist this pressure, even more so as with the end of the Trump presidency, Washington will certainly back Brussels and Berlin rather than Budapest and Warsaw. What is to be done in the face of the double danger coming from Brussels and soon also from Washington? Any form of compliance must lead, at least in the long term, to the demise of conservatism for the next generation, while compromises are becoming increasingly difficult given the leftist radicalization of both the press and many people. Thus, the only intelligent response must lay in a fine-tuned combination between a shrewd playing for time, a stout resistance against all irreversible measures, and finally, the search for an alternative plan B against the dependency from Brussels and Washington. Now, it is obvious that neither Russia nor China are ideal partners for such a plan B or such a political realignment. But a first important step would be a tightening and formalization of the regional alliances with the other Trimarium states. Another would be the establishment of closer contacts with interesting international players such as Japan, Korea, India, Brazil, and of course the United Kingdom, in order to lessen the political and economic dependency from Berlin and Brussels. A final step would be a better cooperation with the conservative opposition powers throughout the West. The people in the Visegrad states must understand that the most important political divide today is not anymore between West and East, but rather between conservatism and globalism, and thus that future political alliances do not only have to consider national, but also ideological interests. The Western civilization can only survive on the basis of a broad conservative consensus and a tight cooperation between the nation states, as I've tried to sketch in my book Renovatio Europae. And should such a transformation of the European Union be impossible, then the East has to reorganize itself in another way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Engels, for the thought-provoking presentation. I'm sure that also our audience has heard a lot about the migration crisis of Europe in the last few years, including the Visegrad position and the standpoint of the 4 countries on this issue. Thank you very much, sir. And now we are moving on to Mr. Tamás Csiki, who will talk about some security-related issues. Tamás, please deliver your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation as well. It is my pleasure to be here and participate in the discussion. I was asked to speak about the more general framework of security and defense policy from the point of view of NATO, and that's what I'm going to do. First, give a very brief overview of what has happened in the past 5 years since the refugee and migration crisis has passed, and what were the developments in this regard, how NATO tried to identify the necessary responses. And I also would like to offer some input regarding the latest development, because maybe only the day before yesterday, we had the NATO reflection group on NATO 2030 publishing their report on the strategic foresight of the transatlantic alliance. And the report also includes some comments on the future of the southern neighborhood security issues. So first of all, we can summarize very briefly that during the past 5 years, we have seen a continuously deteriorating security environment. And it doesn't only lasted for the past 5 years, but it practically started in 2008 with the Russo-Georgian War. We speak about the transatlantic community as a whole, so it's not only for the southern neighborhood perspective, but for the whole alliance. So it started with the Russo-Georgian War in 2008, and then followed by the Arab Spring and its events, and highlighting the Libya crisis in 2011. The next, so to say, strategic shock was for European countries, especially the war in Ukraine, the Russian aggression in Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea, then later on the destabilizing of Eastern Ukraine. The same year, the emergence and strengthening of the Islamic State. And then next year in 2015, the emergence of the migration and refugee crisis. And in 2015 and ever since, we have seen repeated terrorist attacks within Europe. So these appeared as kind of strategic shocks for these countries. And 2014, 2015 has represented a very important dividing line and turn of events for the transatlantic alliance as a whole. This is more present for Eastern and Central European countries in certain aspects, and we can still observe some division among member states of NATO in prioritizing either the Eastern or the Southern challenges that are also different in nature in terms of, let's say, state actors or non-state actors, in state of conventional military or non-conventional other type of challenges. But NATO's approach was to adopt a, so to say, or so-called 360-degree approach, which tries to represent the security perception and concerns of all member states. And NATO tried to highlight that it is paying attention both to the challenges in the East or on the Eastern flank and from the South. We can also say that from the previous decades, the instability that was the outcome of the intervention in Libya has been with us, and NATO played some role, some very decisive role in changing the regime in Libya, and then unfortunately the events did not unfold in the way maybe those who intervened wanted to have a more stable government coming in place. The situation is still unstable and still unresolved, and European countries themselves are divided on the future of Libya. Also, we have witnessed in the past couple of years a certain transition in US or transformation in US foreign policy regarding the Middle East and North African region. We have witnessed a certain retreat. And if we add to this the change of US global posture and the gradual shift of US strategic priorities from the transatlantic region to the Asia-Pacific region, we should also count on lesser US attention in this region. This, as a background, is important to keep in mind that the southern neighborhood is a very important aspect of the work of the alliance, but this is only one aspect, and it is influenced by many factors, some of which cannot be influenced by us. There is also one important thing that I would like to highlight, and also reflecting to what Mr. Engels mentioned, that in terms of security and in terms of defense, the culturalist, ideological, or political divide that is very often voiced and forcefully triggered by various sectors, it cannot be and it should not be a goal. Security for European countries and security for transatlantic community cannot be divided. Therefore, the coherence of NATO and the US security guarantees for European countries are of preeminent importance. This is something that, in my opinion, cannot be debated. As for the current situation and for the coming years, recalling the NATO 2030 Reflection Group, the group named one of the chapters of the report on the security environment as, I quote, the return of systemic rivalry and the rise of global threats, unquote. And here they also pointed out that the two major dimensions of NATO threat perception, the southern and the eastern dimension, are joined through some challenges, and they are joined geographically through the Western Balkans. And this is one of the issues that is of preeminent importance for us in the discussion and for Hungary particularly. So in the past couple of years, and I believe that also in the coming years, NATO's approach in the South has included and will include building the capacity of Southern partner states and neighbors, increasing the alliance's awareness and risk monitoring capabilities, also increasing alliance resilience and responsiveness to security threats and challenges from the South. And especially, it would be an important issue to strengthening our capability to work with the European Union, African Union, and our regional and international organizations in order to establish a cooperative security network across the region. So this is not a one-player mode game, but definitely a multiplayer option. Accordingly, NATO's projects targeting the southern neighborhood have included projecting stability, a framework for the South, defense capacity building, partnerships, and also in a couple of years, maybe 1 year or 2 years ago, a hub for the South was established at JFC Naples. This is the expert group for the NATO community to analyze and deal with challenges from the South. And there's one thing, and I will conclude here, that is or could be important for us. The report and the experts preparing the 2030 foresight point out that the North Atlantic Council should have more discussions on the southern neighborhood challenges, and there should be some allies identified who have a specialist understanding or greater engagement in the South, and they should be asked more to brief about developments in the South. And the North Atlantic Council as a political body should have more insight to what's going on in the South. This also means that some countries, like for example Hungary, could further develop its expertise on the region and try to offer these kind of skills and elements of knowledge to the community of the transatlantic states. Maybe that would be the introduction, and I'm open towards further discussion.
Thank you very much, Tamás, for your presentation. I think NATO is kind of underrepresented in public discourse, but we all know that how important this organization is in delivering peace, preventing peace in the transatlantic alliance and a large number of countries. Thank you very much. And I would call Mr. Peter Wagner to address this event and hold his presentation. We are staying in the field of security issues mixed with some terrorist aspects. Peter, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I was asked to focus on the Al-Qaeda and the ISIS threat. So during my presentation, I will not focus on these two organizations as threats to Europe, because in my understanding, Professor Kis-Benedek will talk about this. So during this short presentation, I will rather talk about how these two organizations evolved in the last 5 years and what is the relation between them. And of course, at the end, in the Q&A section, I can happily share my view on how will it affect Europe, these two organizations, and generally the jihadi threats. So let me. This is an overview, two statements on the two organizations. How did it evolve in the last 5 years? Actually, 2015 is not a specific date for these two organizations, but it's good to see that, as we see in the case of Al-Qaeda, due to the leadership crisis on the top, regional affiliates became more independent, building alliances with non-ideological actors and engaging extensively in local politics. You may hear about the recent killing of an Al-Qaeda number 2 in Iran. The leader of the group, Ayman al-Zawahiri, is presumably dead. Some became dead in the last couple of months. The leadership is hiding somewhere in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but it's became a lame duck in the last couple of years. That's why its regional groups became more and more localized. In the case of ISIS, Islamic State, despite serious losses in territory and manpower, it remains financially solvent, creative, lethal, and able to expand. I will show you 2 maps later on, which will show the status of this organization in 2018 and 2020. We all know that this organization, as a quasi-state, was defeated in 2019, and in 2019 April. And after this event, there was a lot of discussion about the future of the organization, and one of the major agreement was that this organization now pose a lesser threat in the future. On the contrary, I will show it. This organization is reorganizing itself, and I think it is just a question of time when will it pose a new threat to Europe. Let me start with the Al-Qaeda. These are a map from 2018. It's I don't really believe in the numbers, so that's not the important point. The point is that this organization is still widespread throughout the Islamic world. Depending on each of the organizations in Yemen or in Syria or in Libya, they are capable of doing or committing terrorist attacks in a varying degree. I listed here some of the countries where Al-Qaeda is still potent or is still an important player. I don't want to read you all these sentences. Please do it yourself. What I see in the case of Al-Qaeda, that in Syria, this reformed or transformed Al-Qaeda, which even lost its name and severed its contact with the central Al-Qaeda. Central Al-Qaeda is the organization based in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region. So the Syrian Al-Qaeda became one of the major player among the jihadist organization in the area, which is still operated by Syrian free forces. Let me put it this way: so this region in Idlib province, bordering Turkey, is still a place, is still a province where there are various jihadist organizations, and the former Al-Qaeda unit called Al-Nusra Front is among the central player. Yemen is a bit forgotten now, because there are much bigger problems around Europe and in the Islamic world, but the so-called Arabian Islamic Al-Qaeda is still one of the most potent organizations in terms of organizing and committing and conducting terrorist attacks towards Western countries, especially in the United States, and there are several attempts in Europe as well. Somalia is important in a sense that Al-Shabaab, which is not an Al-Qaeda affiliate, but an organization which make bayat to the central Al-Qaeda, is still active in the country. It's still one of the major player. Recent activities show that it's able to attack Western forces in Kenya, killing American soldiers and contractors. And I think the new perspective to this organization, the recent civil war in Ethiopia, which is a major player in the AMISOM, in the African Union formed peacekeeping force in Somalia. And since Ethiopian government is having a civil war and it's withdrawing its forces from Somalia, that means that Al-Shabaab can even increase its activities there. Sahel region is a very interesting place from the perspective of the jihadist organization, because not only the Islamic State, but this local player of the Al-Qaeda, the so-called Akim, is also active. And this is the only place probably in the Islamic world where the Islamic State and the Al-Qaeda has almost the same size of force, of almost have the same strengths. We see some kind of comparison between them, but I think this will be the future place where the two organizations would have a rivalry among them. As we see as the last line, there is a limited cooperation and infighting with local ISIS in this area. This map shows the Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State together, and this is a map from 2018. You can see in orange the countries where only the Islamic State is present, and with blue the countries where both organizations are present. So this is a map from 2018, and in the next map we saw the Islamic State activities in 2020. And what is a novelty in this map is that in North Somalia, ISIS is there, and especially in Congo and Mozambique, and partly in Nigeria is also active. I think the new development in terms of the activities of ISIS is its expansion to the sub-Saharan region, especially in Mozambique. How that is ISIS? I found this very amusing title in a Polish publication. I think this is really point on the problem with talking about ISIS as a finished organization, because what we see in the last 2 years since the end of the so-called quasi-state of the Islamic State or ISIS, that it's continuously regrouping and reinforcing itself. Especially this is the case in Syria and Iraq. Still, this is the base. This is the base of the ISIS activities, meaning that hundreds, if not thousands, of ISIS militants or sympathizers are active in this region. In Syria, the situation a little bit different, because ISIS as a terrorist organization had to fight with the Kurdish, with the local Syrian Kurdish forces on the one hand, and with the Syrian, Iranian government forces on the other hand. But somehow here its activities is more limited than in Iraq. I think the most serious situation is in Iraq among these countries, because since 2019 October there is I don't know how to call it, a civil unrest or a new wave of opposition movement in southern Iraq, and this movement is focusing on the region south of Baghdad, which is the traditional base of the Iraqi government and the Iraqi security forces and the Iraqi militias. So that means that in northern Iraq, the region between the Iraqi Kurdish part and between Baghdad, the capital, the local ISIS cells could gain more and more freedom of movement, freedom of activity. And what we see that in this region, the number of attacks increasing since, let me say, summer of 2019, increasing by its size, by its seriousness every month. And ISIS forces in a group of 5 to 10 to 15 people, not only targeting militia forces, Shia militia forces, or Iraqi armed forces units, but also the local population. We have sources, I don't know believe it, but we have still information that ISIS have something like millions of US dollar from extortion, and they are capable of taxing the population, taxing the local villages and cities. So it has a permanent income. Sinai Peninsula was a former vilayat of the Islamic State. The problem on the Sinai Peninsula is ongoing, but what is good from our perspective is that ISIS cells or units cannot come out from this peninsula. The Egyptian government has a real problem to fight with the ISIS over there, but this conflict is localized. Again, I don't want to list because I don't know how much time we have, but I would like to focus on the sub-Saharan Africa, because what we see in the last year probably, that the ISIS coming through Kenya and coming from Tanzania set up a base in northern Mozambique, and while the local government was unable to fight, its capacities and capabilities was not developed enough for such a well-organized and deadly organization. Since then, we hear news that Wagner Group from Russia was there in North Mozambique to fight against ISIS. They were beaten by the ISIS, so they had to withdraw. And now South African mercenaries are hired by the Mozambican governments to fight against the terrorists without any success. Also in Nigeria, Boko Haram was split when Islamic State was established in 2014. Since then, we see there is an ongoing fighting in between the Boko Haram as an original organization and between the local chapter of the Islamic State. This is the only new development. What we see that there could be infighting among the jihadist group, debating which are the legitimate one. This is a map of the Al-Qaeda and Islamic State affiliates. What we can see that the Al-Shabaab activity in Somalia and Kenya, the ISCAP, the so-called Mozambique Islamic State chapter in Mozambique. There are signs in Congo on the border to Rwanda and Uganda. This is also a new development. We will see how will develop, because Congo is also a failed state. So Islamic State could gain more foothold in that region. And we also see the Sahel region, which I think one of the most unstable region. And next to Iraq, this is the other major region which could affect the security of Europe in terms of potential migration routes toward the continent. And finally, as a concluding remarks, there are some constraints of the AQ and ISIS threats. I'm talking about in the last couple of minutes that Al-Qaeda and the ISIS are everywhere, and they are spreading in the Islamic world. But we have to see also that in some of the cases, these are not big numbers. So even if one terrorist attack in Congo could have the feeling that there is a problem, but we also have to see that only in Syria and Iraq, and also in the Sahel region, we can see a huge number of terrorist members. What we see in Afghanistan or in Yemen or in the Sinai, that the number of attacks and the number of terrorists are actually very limited. The last line of this side is that outside intervention is possible. I'm just included this because with the new American organization, there is a tendency to return to find the Islamists, to find the jihadists as a potential threats to fought against. And since they are non-state actors, it is much more convenient to the Americans to continue this war on terror. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Unfortunately, this topic is always current and relevant, I was just wondering that how many times ISIS has been totally defeated and buried, but it is not actually never invited to its own funeral. It seems so, unfortunately. Thank you very much for your presentation. And last but not least, I am calling Professor Kis-Benedek to take the floor and deliver his presentation. Professor, the floor is yours. Are you here, Professor?
Oh, I think he's speaking.
Oh, unmute yourself.
It's going?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I think the whole topic is very important. I will speak only on one part of the whole topic, the terrorism in Europe. If we mention the terrorism in Europe, I have to connect and to mention Peter Wagner, who spoke about the Al-Qaeda. Both of them are important in the terrorism in Europe. Of course, among the two organizations, more important is the ISIS. In the territory of EU, a total of 119 completed and foiled terrorist attacks happened last year. There were reported by a total of 13 EU member states. Last year, 1,004 individuals were arrested in suspicion of terrorism-related offenses. Of course, the most important countries are Belgium, France, Italy, Spain, and the United Kingdom. I have to mention that the number of arrested people is growing year by year. This means that the security services are working much better than before. Here you can see the terrorist attack and arrest. Altogether, last year it happens total terrorist attack 119 and arrest 1,004. This is a huge number. If you go into details, you can see even the countries in the report of the Europol. In Europe, there are five types of terrorism: the jihadist terrorism, the ethno-nationalist and separation terrorism, left-wing, right-wing, and single-issue terrorism. Of course, taking into consideration the aim of our conference, I will speak mainly from the jihadist terrorism. The question is whether we can speak about jihadist terrorism, because in the Europol reports, they use a narrow definition of jihadism. Jihadism is a little bit more wide than we use usually in the reports and the Western countries as well. The jihadist terrorism, instead of jihadist terrorism, the expression of jihadist terrorism, in this year, I have read in the report of the Europol other expression. This is religiously inspired terrorism. This is more elegant, much more elegant than the jihadist terrorism, because it offends some people, many religious people. If you see the terrorist attack from 2017 to 2019, this year cannot be told. The number of terrorist attack 2017 was 205, 2018 129, and 2019, so last year, 109. So we see a small diminish in the number of terrorism. Jihadist terrorism, I will use this expression, total 33 in 2017, 24 in 2018, and 20 in 2019. I think next year, I mean from the 2020, it will be more. The number will a little bit higher. Number of suspects arrested for jihadist terrorism from 2015-2019 is less. If you see, in 2015 was 687. The peak was 2016, 718, and we go last year 436. So there is some changes in the number. Peter mentioned the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda. In Europe, they are present in small cells, very important, but very important is the activity in prisons. The prisons are university for terrorists, as we used to say, and the radicalization. The number of radicalized people is growing year by year. For example, in France, they reported for the Europol that more than 500 terrorists live in prison alongside with 900 radicalized individuals. And the situation is similar in Spain or in France as well. Let's see some peculiarities of the European terrorism. First of all, we have to mention that the terrorist attacks are committed by individual acting alone. I'm not sure that this is alone. Usually in some days or some weeks, we can see that there is something or some organization behind the individual acting people. In 2018, the number of attacks fought by law enforcement was double, and completed and failed attack happened in a great number. 2 attempted journeys to join terrorist group were reported as having started by EU member states for 2019. An important question is the return of refugees or return of foreign fighters from Syria or Iraq. There are no signs of systematic use of irregular or illegal migration terrorist organization. Among the peculiarities, I have to mention that the connection between illegal migration and terrorism, which is in the focal point of security dilemmas, is very important for us, and important not for the research institute, but for the intelligence and law enforcement organization. The basic question is whether the terrorists can come together with terrorists, terrorists can come with refugees or not. This is a 1 million point question. There are countries saying that the refugees are arriving from different parts of the world are or give the possibility for terrorist organization to send some people. But the aim of the refugees to come to Europe are not always terrorism. So this is a great mistake if we use the expression that migrants are terrorists. There are plenty of argument, pro and contra, that the wave of immigration which began in 2015, raises the connection between terrorism and irregular migration. Of course, there are some concrete examples. The jihadists have infiltrated in the refugee stream. In Germany, for example, there are many missing jihadists. In 2016, Germany told that they are losing track of 130,000 migrants, raising fears over crime or terrorism. But I would like to emphasize that the direct connection between terrorism and migration is a strategic mistake. If we speak about migration and terrorism, I would like to say that in Europe, there is no shortage of lone wolf militants already in place. So for terrorist organization, it's much better to use people living in Europe or radicalized people and use those people for terrorism. Of course, after the Paris attack, the situation changed, and it's some concrete example that migration is connected to the terrorism in Europe. Of course, there is no need for them to send people right now, but this maybe will change over the time. So sometimes we can say that there is a connection, sometimes not. What is the future? The future is this tendency will continue, and it is important to controlling immigration, but I would say the irregular immigration, the illegal immigration must be controlled is together with the outside border of Europe. Monitoring mosque. After the Paris attack, we have seen that the French government decided to monitor the mosque and Islamic centers and madrasas. Of course, there are many people among the religious people that don't like it. Even there are some remarks that people are feared because of being called Islamophobic by Islamic supremacist groups across Europe. The freedom of European societies is already threatened due to its curbing of the freedom of speech in the face of Sharia pressure, cracking down on the encryption of messaging application will likely only future that initiative. The French government deals after these attacks in Nice and other parts of France that it is important to make a severe control on the Islamic groups. The jihadist movement, hostility toward the Christian institution, the ISIS war against the West could well shift the Southern Europe Catholic countries. We have seen many attacks, and experts are studying the possibility of new attacks in the southern part of Europe, mainly in Italy or Spain. Jihadi mobilization of radicalized subpopulation within Europe, Muslim diaspora communities remain strong in the future as well. So there are not sleeper cells capable of striking Europe is a question mark, but I think that some sleeper cells are present in Europe and they are helped by the Islamic terrorist organization. I mean mainly the ISIS, as we saw in the Péter lecture. It was mentioned that in many parts of Africa and the Middle East, they are present. Of course, they have effect on Europe as well. A new and important thing is the Schengen borders. The Schengen borders means that it's free moving in ideas, people, and of course, transport. But the Schengen borders should be controlled much better than before, and this is due to the terrorism. Even this week, the French government, the president made a proposal for the Schengen countries to deal more with the Schengen borders, with the security of the Schengen borders. I think my time is over. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your presentation. Well, I think these statistics that you mentioned, these estimates are still way too high in Europe, and so you can be sure that the secret services and the counterterrorism services have to be very active in the field, unfortunately. Thank you very much. Well, we've just finished with presentations, and I'm almost happy to tell you that to inform you that all of our speakers received some question through me in the private chat, and I'm very happy to ask them one by one. So I think we can keep the order that was observed in the presentations. I kindly ask you to stick to 2 minutes per answer, and you will have one each of you. So, Mr. Engels, is the Visegrad cooperation a single issue cooperation, and it's all about refusing migration to Europe, or is it something else? Is it something more? And the person who asked this also refers to the Slovaks and Czechs who recently let's say, have taken a different road compared to, for example, Hungary and our Polish friends. How do you see this whole thing?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I've understood your question. I lost. I have a bad connection for the moment.
Oh, I'm more than happy to repeat. So, is the Visegrad cooperation a single issue cooperation, and it's all about refusing migration to Europe, or you see it wider, more valuable, more stable as far as the future is concerned, for example? And the person who asked this also referred to the Slovaks and Czechs who recently have taken different roads compared to the Polish and Hungarians. So how do you see this? Okay, and please try to stick to 2 minutes in your answer.
Okay, now I got the question. Thank you very much for repeating. I think that cooperation between the Visegrad states and in general Eastern Central European states is a necessity. We need to cooperate in Europe. We cannot survive as single nation state. The threats coming from China, from Islamic radicalization, from our many inner problems, from African immigration and so on, are much too great. We have to unite in some way or the others as nation states in Europe if we want to defend our Western civilization. And that means that if the European Union, as is the case for the present, is transforming more and more into an enemy of Western civilization and not a guarantor of our identity, then we have to find other solutions. That is why I think that states outside of this axis of France and Germany need to ally themselves very strongly, not only on single issues like migration or issues like LGBTQ rights or things like that, but try to strengthen and to formalize their cooperation in order to represent not a competitor, but at least an alternative to the way the European Union is going for the moment. And I think that the Visegrad states may be the nucleus of such a future alternative to what the European Union is becoming. Of course, that needs some form of concertation, of formalization also of agreements, of some form also of ideological compromise, of course, between the different players, but also of expansion, for example, to the Balticum or to Southeastern Europe. I think that's the only way we have if we want still to stick our tradition, to our history, and somehow counter the German-French couple, which is more and more imposing its own very specific ideological agenda on the rest of Europe. That's more or less my view on what the Visegrad states cooperation could look like and how it should expand into something much larger and formalized.
Thank you very much. I think your answer was exhaustive, given the time limit of us. Okay, I'm turning to Tamás. Here's an interesting question addressed to you. Do you expect any significant NATO capability building aspirations in the future to address threats from the south?
Thank you very much. Well, briefly, no. In more detail, to some extent, maybe we can hope for this. So, to put it right, the threats and challenges observed by NATO member countries from the East and the South are very much unbalanced in various aspects, in terms of their nature, in terms of the actors that pose these challenges, and also in terms of the possible answers that NATO and other institutions would be able and capable to provide. When we speak about soft security challenges that are not primarily military, like migration or terrorism, then there must be a very decisive and strong division of labor between the European Union and NATO. And most of these issues, the soft challenges that require also soft answers, should belong to the European Union. What NATO can provide is the, so to say, higher end of these challenges that are closer to the military spectrum, which means intelligence, surveillance, the development of local security institutions, of partner institutes, partner states, we can also point to the security sector reform of these countries. And in some cases, it might be also possible that in the mid to long term, again, a foreign intervention would be necessary. The past 2 decades have shown that intervening in countries in the neighborhood, in the south or southeast, or further in Central Asia is not maybe the prime idea that we should build upon and the prime tool that we should use. But NATO could be or would be capable to carry out such an operation in the mid to long term. Long term by me here means the 2030s. So whatever happens, the European Union won't be in a position to carry out large-scale military operation until the mid-2020s as it is now, and there are some doubts that even after that. Supposing that the more or less dynamic integration in terms of multinational cooperation and the Union would go on. So what can NATO do? Provide these capabilities until the European member states or the European Union would be able to do this, whether through EU institutions or in an ad hoc coalition. When I mentioned that the United States had a primary role in the past 2 decades was because they provided the strategic enablers for such operation, but also for the normal presence of NATO in these regions through intelligence sharing, through surveillance and so on. As the US is its policy towards the MENA region, these assets might be lacking in the coming years. So NATO still can decide, for example, among European member countries to develop some additional capabilities. But as long as these are provided, it is the United States that we depend upon. And it is the local actors that should be empowered more. So when I say that that NATO is only likely to develop limited capabilities in this regard, is because NATO is pretty much preoccupied on the one hand by other issues like deterring Russia and providing defense for all member countries on their territory. One issue that is coming up from the south, and maybe it's more related to defense and military issues, is the freedom of navigation and access to high seas. the Mediterranean maritime security issues. These also are important for NATO, but maybe it wouldn't be provided within a very substantial NATO framework, but more the southern member states by themselves would provide maritime security. So that would be my brief comment. I hope I kept the time, and we can come back to this if you need more details.
Thank you very much. I think it was kind of exhausting and very comprehensive one. Thank you. The next question should be addressed to Mr. Wagner. Is there any cooperation, coordination between the central organization of ISIS and its peripheries?
Thank you for the question. As far as I understood, there is no such thing. There could be occasional communication between, let me say, the central ISIS, but we don't have too much information about that. I think actually we know that from arrested and kidnapped ISIS operatives that ISIS was preparing for the defeat. So they are stacking up money, financial resources, distributed them among its vilayets, and its local affiliates were preparing to work independently. Since the death of the leader of this organization, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, there was a new caliph who was elected, chosen by the few, and while it was a success from the perspective of the organization that although this new leader was unknown to the most of the membership of the organization, there were no real challenge by the different wilayats and chapters. So as far as we know, there is no such command and communication between the central organization and the others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And last but not least, I'm turning to Professor. Can Hungary suffer a terrorist attack like Vienna recently in the future? Is there a potential threat of such an attack? What do you think?
I don't think so that Hungary is threatened by terrorist organizations, but however, they use our territory for logistical support. They are using the possibility of different hotels to enjoy their time, and sometimes prepare an attack in the neighboring or in the Western countries. But I don't think so that Hungary is an aim for the terrorist organization, because the background, the population of those who can help the terrorism is very, very few. Those Arabs are who live in our country, they have profession, and they want to stay for a long time in the country. So I don't think so that there is a danger. Of course, 100% security is not possible. So we must prepare ourselves for an attack. And if happens something in the neighboring country, for example, we have seen some weeks ago terrorist attack in Vienna. Of course, we have proved that we are ready even to help or to defend the country. So this is important. Important is the cooperation between intelligence services inside the country and with foreign services, and this can help in preventing any terrorist attack.
Okay, thank you very much for your exhaustive answer, Mr. Kis-Benedek. Well, no more questions as far as I can see, and I also think that our time is up by now. So all that's left for me is to say thank you for being here with us today, dear audience, ladies and gentlemen, dear speakers. I'm sure and I'm convinced that we've heard very valuable and good practical information, pieces of knowledge today, and I'm sure these topics will remain very relevant also in the future. And I think it was very fruitful for all of us attending this event. And also let me thank you on behalf of our institute that you joined us today. I'm happy to recommend you our next week's session in collaboration with the Climate Policy Institute on the 10th of December, next Thursday. You can find information very soon on our Facebook and other platforms of us. And you are very welcome. The topic, of course, will be climate change in Africa. And I think these issues also promise very valuable insights and very clever thoughts. So you are very welcome also next time. And of course, unfortunately, in these times of the pandemic, I have to warn you and advise you to take care of yourself and your beloved ones. And hopefully we will get over this hard situation soon together. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. See you next time. Goodbye.